Hello, Michael. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. How are you guys doing?
No complaints, my friend. No complaints. So, normally at this point, I ask you to introduce yourself and basically explain, where you've been, what you're doing, and how you ended up getting here.
Oh, yeah, that's a big story.
Right?
I'll go back just about 18 years as well when I first got into and started. I got turned on to biochar kind of accidentally at an Earth Day event, and nobody was even talking about it. I just happened to meet this guy, and he turned me on to it, and I've been using it, studying it, researching it, teaching it for these last 18 years. And I've made a lot of biochar. I've used a lot of biochar. I've sold an awful lot of biochar in that time. And when I first started, most people like, what are you talking about? They had no idea what I was going at. And at this point now, it's like the most common question is, where can I get it? And that's come a long ways. And because I'm involved with the biochar community, through the International Biochar Initiative and the United States Biochar Initiative, we just recently had one of our conferences in Sacramento in February, and it was astounding what's happening, the exponential growth, the various areas that biochar is going into besides just as a soil amendment, many, many different areas. And we're going to discuss a little bit of that as we move along. But yeah, it's been an incredibly exciting road up until this point, and finally we've got recognition on so many levels that it's just a matter of time before we really start implementing it on a larger scale.
Very cool. Well, by all means, do open up. Let us know what other places are they using biochar.
Well, one of them is in building materials. And we've known about this for a while, but it's starting to really pick up speed now. And that is one of them, of course, is mixing biochar with cement. And there's many advantages. I know of no disadvantages. The advantages are that it, of course, lightens the cement, lowers the carbon footprint, because, of course, we all know cement has an incredibly high carbon footprint in production, shipping and usage. So we are able to lighten it, cut that, but it also gives strength to the cement. And it's not just cement, of course, this is concrete.
Mhm.
And it gives strength to it, sort of like the aggregate that's added to the cement to make the concrete. But the biochar has so many different things. It'll cure better, it gives better sound quality, it has better R factor, a number of things that are happening with that. Now, I personally started experimenting with it last summer, where I poured a 3 foot by 9 foot cement slab for my barbecue, and I put 25% biochar in there. It cured beautiful. It's strong. It came out a really cool, like dark battleship gray, different than what cement would normally look like. But it did lighten after it fully cured, but it's still different than what we look at, the cement nearby in other areas in the garden. So that's a big one. Now, I happened to, because of that conference, I ended up getting pulled into a group of guys, scientists, some of the most renowned scientists in biochar and other areas, and a bunch of business people to create a company that will create this cement biochar combination. But it's not just as simple as mixing biochar in there, although you can, and that's what I did, and that's what most people do. But these guys have taken it to a level that's wow. They're processing the biochar differently. They're adding some mineral content to it, pyrolyzing it while the wood is being pyrolyzed or carbonized. The minerals are fusing, and it creates these incredible chains of these minerals, particularly silica and the biochar. And it makes it not only better for the cement, but it just so happens it's also even better for the soil as well. So that whole thing is moving along pretty rapidly. We're not ready to, launch anything. Now, this group is going after a very specific market. They're not going after the construction market initially. Right now, what we're looking at is going after the capping of old oil and gas wells. They're leaking everywhere. Methane is coming out of the ground everywhere. Many of these drilling sites are basically what we call orphaned, where nobody's caring for them. Whoever drilled them originally had the rights to the underground. The property owners do not, and they abandoned them. And most of the people who built those sites are pretty much dead now because they were built so long ago. So methane's leaking everywhere, and the cement cap plus all the things that go down below it have been not working. They're using pure cement, and you know how brutal that is. Cracks very easily. So these caps are not working. So we've developed something that will make them incredibly strong and also have healing power, sealing up some of the cracks that may occur. And that's due, I'm not going to get into the technical part, but that's due to the biochar and biology that would literally glue the crack together. And they've seen this already happening. So very exciting. Paints, plasters, cob, if you're into cob making. Biochar is an excellent additive to that. So an interesting story, this goes back over a dozen years ago. A guy named Hans Peter Schmidt in Switzerland was biocharing the vineyard. And while they were there, they were replastering the cellars. So they put biochar, micronized biochar, into the plaster, plastered everything. Color was a little different. But three particular things occurred that were very positive. Well, two, of course. One is that the temperature, and two, the humidity always stayed at a very level point. It didn't have to be altered hardly at all, if ever. That was cool. The odd part was they were never able to use their cell phones in those cellars again because the biochar cut out all radio wave and electromagnetic field. It's sort of like a Faraday cage,
Yep.
if you know what a Faraday cage is. So that was very interesting. I've had clients buy it and mix it in with paint for the outside of their house. So there's all kinds of uses there. Now, there is a book that I'm going to highly recommend. Let me see if, I don't think I have a copy. Oh, yes, I do. Let me go grab this quick. Real
Sure.
quick. The book is called Burn, Using Fire to Cool the Earth by Albert Bates and Kathleen Draper. I highly recommend this book. First of all, it's one of the most inspiring books I've read in many years. And it takes you into everywhere biochar can go. So we have a listing of about 55 uses for biochar. So it's really broad: air filtration, water filtration, soil amendment, soil remediation, taking toxic soils and cleaning them up, biochar being a key component in doing that, along with biology and certain plants. So there's another avenue of it. So we're not going to get into all of them, but as far as other exciting areas for biochar, well, not so much for biochar, but about biochar, and I've been wanting to share this with you guys. For about 7 years now, a friend of mine, Ray Serino, we've been talking to Burning Man about taking them to a new paradigm shift from smoke and ash to little to no smoke and biochar. Well, we got their attention. Just last weekend, we did a demonstration up at the Burning Man facility on the playa at the Fly Ranch, and this was a group called Burners Without Borders. And what their job is they handle all of the other Burning Man events all over the world. There's the main event, and then there's about 80 other events around the world. We have one here in Los Angeles called Bequinox, and they're having their burn coming up very soon. So Ray built this beautiful, art piece. From above, it looked like a heart. And we lit it from the top. That's the key thing in preventing all that smoke and just getting ash, is that you light from the top, let it burn down, as opposed to light it from the bottom and let it burn up. Because once you light it from the bottom, the whole thing just ignites. All that oxygen turns all that carbon into ash. But when you light it from the top, as it slowly burns down, the coals became a bed of coals, and they basically stay in a carbonous state with little ash content. And even when we get some ash, we can easily wash that away because we're not looking for that ash. We're looking just for the carbon. And just so everybody understands what biochar is, just I think it's important to point this out. Biochar is charcoal suitable for soil. It's fully carbonized. So in other words, that piece of wood that we make this biochar from is so carbonized that it's all that's left is the carbon skeleton. All the organic matter that was within that piece of wood has been driven out. And that's got uses. We can make wood vinegar, we can make bio-oil, syngas, other things from that. But that piece of biochar is purely carbonized. The difference between cooked charcoal is it's not fully carbonized, it's still organic matter, so it has igniting power. Pure biochar really does not ignite, except in certain circumstances. But basically it does not ignite or has extremely high flash point. So biochar used in the soil is a management system. So it's not a food, it's not a fertilizer, it's just a structure that when we put this granular structure in the ground around the root zone and the roots attached to it, it holds 7 times its weight in water. So now it's got drought tolerance. The moisture in the soil stays longer than without the biochar. The nutrients in our soil are absorbed by the biochar. We fill it up with nutrients as well. And so there's these little reservoirs of water, warehouses of nutrients that the root system attaching to the biochar has access to. But most important and most exciting about this biochar is the pore structure. If we look at it under a microscope, the pore structure are luxury condos to the microbiology. And they do expand their colonies, and it's fantastic for the microbiology in the soil. It's just really that simple. Other things, though, is biochar is carbon negative 3 to 1, meaning for every pound we put into the ground, we have sequestered 3 pounds of carbon gases from going in the atmosphere. Because the material that's laying around decomposing, we pyrolyze it, lock that carbon in there, bury it in the ground, 3 to 1 negative. That's pretty significant. Now, if you use biochar well and properly with the right protocols, you're going to save on water, a little bit more reduction in carbon footprint, save on fertilizer and nutrient imports, a little bit lower. Building biology, carbon sink, pretty amazing. Biochar is a fixed carbon, and its lifespan is many, 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 many centuries. We know this because the ancient indigenous peoples of Brazil, the Amazon region, particularly where we have the terra preta de Indio, the dark soil of the indigenous, that biochar that was put in there as long as 3,000 years ago is still working. And we know of 8,000-year-old biochar made by humans because of carbon dating. But we don't know much about that culture, but we do know a lot about what the ancient Amazonians did. So long life, carbon sequestering, holding water, holding nutrients, advancing microbiology. That's just the start. So that's kind of what biochar really is and how we should be looking at it. In this book, they do describe so many different other uses, and they even have a chapter on the wood vinegar, which I think people should know about. Wood vinegar is a co-product of making biochar, not a byproduct. They're actually equal. Wood vinegar will be as big as biochar is one day. I've been pioneering it for 12 years now, getting headway. People are acknowledging it. Basically, it's a form of liquid smoke. So to describe what how biochar fits into our world, okay, and how wood vinegar fits in our world, we're going to go back 500 million years. When the first plants started to burn on Earth and left that char behind, that's when it all started to happen. We would not be here if it were not for fire. So the study of fire is important to understand. So when we're looking at fire, okay, and what fire does in a natural setting, fire is always burnt on the ground. They were never really big and giant going into the grounds for the most part. They burn on the ground. But climate change and so many other aspects have caused much more intensity in these fires. But fire cleans up the excess plants. It leaves the char behind. And the smoke from the fire is as important as the fire because many plants and seeds require smoke and fire to put their seeds out. The smoke covers everything in its path with a sticky residue. That's wood vinegar. And the seeds that get covered will germinate in a higher percentage and come up faster and healthier in their initial stages. So the wood vinegar is basically that. So we know fire is essential, but we don't want our homes and businesses to burn down. So we mimic nature by making biochar, excuse me, in a clean way, using it in urban, suburban areas as if we had the fire without the fire. And the wood vinegar, the same thing. We're going to spray our plants. We're going to use it for soil drenching. It's an acidic acid, but it's also different than other vinegars because this vinegar is pyrolygenous acid. It's made from smoke, not fermented like apple cider or white vinegar. And it has within it hundreds of organic compounds that plants thrive on. So it is actually a biostimulant, but also it's a protector against insects and pests because they do not like the smoke. Remember, during a fire, everything goes away. We're mimicking that by using the wood vinegar in our urban and suburban areas, just like the fire would do. So that's kind of a symbiotic thing, I think, between biochar and wood vinegar. They really play a role together very strongly. So wood vinegars are a very important thing. Every person who gardens should have a bottle of wood vinegar because it has so many uses. For instance, we use it when we're germinating our seeds. Now, everybody's got a formula for germinating seeds that they soak the seeds in, and many of them work and they're very good. I'm not knocking any of them, but this is nature's first choice. This is what nature created to do this. So I take an ounce of wood vinegar, I'll throw some EM1, maybe compost tea or compost extra, whatever. Basically, the wood vinegar alone will do it, but sometimes I enhance it. I take that 1 ounce of wood vinegar per gallon and whatever else I'm going to add, and I soak the seeds for about 30 minutes. Now, if they're really hard-shelled seeds, I might go a couple of hours, but most seeds take about 20 to 30 minutes. Pull them out, go ahead and germinate, plant, whatever method you're going to do, and that percentage of those seeds is going to be very, very high that it will germinate. Even older seeds. I've taken 20-year-old seeds that I couldn't germinate in water, and they came in, they started popping because of the wood vinegar. So it's biomimicry. So 3 things that excite me: the study of fire, the study of indigenous practice, because remember, indigenous peoples, everything they did in their world was right in front of their face. They didn't have the distractions in our world today. So they were in tune with whatever minor changes took place. And the other thing is biomimicry, studying what nature does, how indigenous peoples interpreted it, and now how we interpret it differently, but with more efficiency and higher technology. But basically, it's all the same from what nature did, humans did, and now what modern humans are doing with biochar and wood vinegar. Do we have any questions at this point?
Oh man, all right, yeah,
Go for it.
You put out a lot to unpack, so I'm going to reel it back to the introduction of silica in the pyrolysis part of the making of biochar. Is it just silica, or have you played with calcium as well?
Well, the experiments are going on right now, and they're using different materials. One of the interesting things about carbon, number 6 on the periodic table, it's one of very few elements that can seize or can join to itself and other things. Not all elements, most of them cannot do that, but carbon can. And so when it's pyrolyzed with this material, it creates these new chains. I don't know if anybody recognizes this here. See this little thing here around my neck? Yep. What is that?
That's a carbon chain, my friend.
That is a buckyball, or what's called Buckminster fullerene. Buckminster Fuller came up with this whole concept. So when carbon starts to seize together, and you'll see this little 6-shaped thing, 6-sided, and then there's a little 5-sided right there. So 5 carbon atoms fused together and then they continue to do that. So it's very interesting how they do that, how that happens. I can't get into too much depth about the technology because it is kind of internet intellectual property that these guys are holding, and so I can just share with you the limited amount I can at this time. But it's coming, and it's pretty exciting.
Got you. So you really can't speak on the other minerals that they're playing with.
I cannot. No,
Okay.
I cannot at this time.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I just find that very interesting. Right now, I'm doing a very deep dive on understanding other forms of carbon, i.e., exudates, DOM, dissolved organic matter. You make compost extracts. You have a understanding of the power of that material in enhancing and rebuilding dirt into soil. So, yeah, carbon has been on my tongue for the last probably 6 to 8 months, pretty hard. Like it's one of the things that is very interesting because, like you said, it forms chains, forms bonds. Some of them are harder to break, others less so. But bottom line is that it just keeps expanding on itself, which is really a very powerful element if you think about it. So, all right, so we can't get too deep on the
Well,
mineral.
I can say that a couple of the items that are being experimented. One is diatomaceous earth,
Mhm.
and the other is bentonite clay.
Okay.
But there are others that I'm unaware of, or I can't pronounce mostly, that they're utilizing this. And these guys are amazing scientists, well known. They're Australian, so this is an international group of people. We have Zoom calls, regularly every week on various aspects of getting to the point. So now we're at the point where we're doing our testing.
So, are they producing it here in America, or are they producing?
Nobody's doing this yet. No,
Okay.
well, I shouldn't say nobody. There are people that are already mixing biochar with cement and getting good results. But what we're trying to do is get to a very high point where we have an amazingly strong type of cement for these capping of these oil and methane and gas wells. So it's a little different than what we may be going into with construction or with other aspects of the cement and biochar industry.
So that's an interesting. That was going to be my next place to talk about was like Roman concrete. Basically,
Yeah,
self heals itself, right? And
yeah.
same idea of adding these other components so that literally it cracks and it heals its own cracks.
Yeah, and I don't think scientists have really figured out completely how they did it. I mean, this is at least what I keep reading about. We really don't know exactly how they did it, but they did it and it's still here.
Yeah. So again, like people don't understand that concrete and cement, they're more chemistry now than they were traditionally with
Yeah.
Portland's and some of these other, traditional concrete mixes.
Mhm.
So that's where I see, this is really interesting because like back when I was, in construction, they came out with this type of concrete where they used fibercrete. I don't know if you remember that stuff. And that was supposed to be, oh, it's never going to crack. It's going to, have all these wonderful properties. It didn't turn out to be jack. I mean,
Well, I think they could have brought it to somewhere, but I just don't think they took it far enough. If they experimented enough, they would find the right combination of the fiber, other materials to get it to work. I have a friend who makes hempcrete with biochar. He's been doing it for quite a few years. And last year he came over to the house and he had a little box and he didn't want to tell me what was in it and sat me down. And he goes, I got something interesting. I wish I had it with me right now. It's in my office. I don't have my warehouse. It's a little cube of cement with biochar, shredded hemp, and shredded palm fiber. And it's pretty cool.
palm or coconut?
Palm.
Interesting.
Palm fronds. It's a terrible issue right now in most communities because the dumps that take them from the tree companies and the landscapes don't want them because
No.
they don't break down very easily. And if they do take them, they charge you a much higher tipping fee to take them. So we figured out, a group of us about 10 years ago came up with a business plan just to do that. But we were all so busy, we never really took it to anywhere. But we created the business plan and we found the right machine that can shred them to put them into a pyrolysis system and carbonize them. And it turns out they make pretty good carbon. I tend to lean towards woody biomass for the biochar that I would use or that I would sell. The biochar that I sell, I work with this group for many years, and it's pine, it's beetle kill pine in the Northwest. So we're doing a good thing by taking all that out of there, carbonizing it, turning it into biochar. During the process, they're creating electricity for the grid in Oregon. So there's two incomes, one from the electricity production and one from the biochar.
Is that a company you're a part of?
No, I've just been working with them. I'm a rep for them. Great group. We are in the top 4 biochar companies in America, as far as quality, as far as quantity and production. Plus, we have a really great infrastructure. So when we get an order for a full 104-yard truckload, it's easy for us to do. And we have a client that does that, and every 3 weeks they order another one. We can easily fulfill that. And a lot of the companies in America aren't quite there. They'll struggle to get the first load out, and to try to get another one out in 3 weeks, very difficult. Although there are companies out there that can do it, we just happen to have this contract. It's been going on for 2.5 years with a soil company. Again, I hate to say this, but I have an NDA with them, so I can't discuss who they are or what they're doing. But basically, they buy an awful lot of our biochar.
Gotcha.
And they ship it from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Oh, so they're doing work on the East Coast.
They're on the East Coast, this group, and they send their own shipping company there, pick it up, so we don't have to get involved with that. We just load it up. They give us the PO, boom, it's ready. They take it. So that says something. We are not, in the biochar world, we're not crazy about having to ship it like that. But initially, sometimes that's necessary. But that also tells you another thing. This group is a very smart group. They are no kidding around smart people. They researched biochar and production all over the US, and they chose us. And that says an awful lot about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So, we wish they would use it more locally, but nonetheless, at least it's going on.
Hey, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, for the time being, until we can get more systems out there. Ideally, wherever we have a pyrolysis plant, we want to have our feedstock nearby, and we want to have our customers nearby. It's the shipping part is what ruins the return on investment. But if you can do that, and a lot of them are doing it, that's a great place to be, and that's where we see the market going.
Yep. Again, pop them up like McDonald's.
Kind of.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So I have to ask this: when you are doing this process, obviously you've got some IP involved in the breaking down of or creating the biochar, collecting the wood vinegar. Is there anything you can discuss about that?
Oh, sure. That's not really IP so much, because you can't patent making biochar. You can patent your system doing certain little things. Okay, but the making of biochar, anybody can do in a hole in the ground in their backyard, or in, a drum or a barrel or something. So there's 1,000 ways to make biochar. On a commercial level, it's a sophisticated pyrolysis system. And so to give it, if without having any images on this, envision right now this large tube. Let's say it's 12 inches in diameter and it's 20 feet long. And there's an Archimedes screw in it, moving, pulling the wood chips through it at a certain rate. Outside of that tube is another chamber where all the heat is. So it's indirect heat without oxygen, because on each end of that tube with the screw are airlocks. Wood burns twice. First, it burns to charcoal. With the presence of oxygen, it'll go to ash. With the absence or limit of oxygen, it'll stay in a carbonous state. So we're really wanting that carbonous state. So that's why we want to do it in an air-free or an oxygen-free environment. Now, ultimately, if you have the coolest system on the planet, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have your wood material coming in. You're going to be pyrolysizing it. The organic matter within that comes out and is captured. You can make bio oils. You can make wood vinegar. You can make syngas. There's a few different things you can make from that. And you can also use that in an afterburner to create heat, to run steam, to create electricity. Then of course, at the end, you get the valuable product biochar. But there's one other product that can be grabbed, probably more than one, but CO2. We can use it for algae ponds. We can use it for greenhouses. So that can be captured. So you can imagine taking this waste wood, carbonizing it, and getting all these values off of it at the same time. Not everybody is at that point yet, but many of them are taking some of those aspects and building it into their systems.
Very cool. So when you're doing this process on a commercial level, what is the percentage of wood vinegar versus the percentage of biochar?
Well, that's not easy to determine exactly because it depends on the feedstock. It depends on what temperatures you're processing at. There's a lot of variables in there that can change those numbers many different ways. For instance, when you're doing the electricity for the biochar with the biochar, you can have more electricity, less biochar, more biochar, less electricity. So there's a variation there, and you can choose by different functions of the system how you want to do that. I would think that the system that we're doing in Oregon is equal biochar and electricity. They want to get value equally from both.
And you're talking about generating electricity,
Correct.
not using it. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Generating, that's correct.
I want to make sure the audience
Very little electricity is used in the pyrolysis system. And also, just if you haven't asked this question, you might be thinking it. How do we start these systems up, and how do they run? Well, some run on natural gas, some run on a few run on electricity. And what happens is the natural gas is creating the heat. However, remember, we're getting syngas and all kinds of heat value out of that. Now, that syngas can be driven back into the process to reduce the natural gas input because now it's going to stoke the fire. Mm-hmm. So the syngas can be used to come back around and continue the fire by reducing any further input of energy. It actually takes over for that gas that started it up.
Wait. So you can actually shut the natural gas valve off and let it operate on its own?
Some systems that are built that way, yes, they do. They start up on natural gas or propane just to get it going. And once the wood starts pyrolyzing or carbonizing, the gases come out and they're ignitable. An example would be if you wanted to make what we call a retort. A retort is the airtight system where the biochar is indirectly heated by the flame. So you could take a 35-gallon drum with a lid and a clamp, and on the bottom you're going to put a few holes, like half-inch holes, maybe 6 of them. You're going to fill that barrel with the wood that you want to make the biochar from. You're going to take that 35-gallon drum and you're going to place it in a 55-gallon drum. It has certain holes around the bottom, specific spacing and sizing. It has a lid that seals with a big, like 6-inch opening on the top. So in between the 2 barrels, that space, we fill it with wood. That's our fuel to carbonize what's in the middle. We light that from the top, put the lid on. Then we put a smokestack, at least 5 or 6 feet tall, 6 inches, that sits on top of that hole. And as it starts to carbonize and heat up that middle drum, the gases that are in that drum that are coming out of the bottom are coming up and stoking the fire to make it even hotter to fully carbonize that interior. It's a simple system. I have one. I don't use it anymore because I have other ones that I like. I can make faster and better. Yeah, there it is. These are similar. There it is. Yeah, that one right there on the right. So these are all variations on the simple 35 and 55-gallon drum. Yeah, the one on the bottom left is pretty cool. The one next to that, that's somebody custom made that thing. So yeah, that's one system. Now, I like using what I call a pyramid kiln. Originally, we were making these cone kilns. And so basically it's 46 inches at the top, 18 at the bottom, 24 high, and it's a cone. It's a truncated cone with no bottom. I mean, no point. It's sealed on the bottom. It's all watertight. We put a little stack of wood in there, like Lincoln logs. We call that a rick. We light that from the top. As it burns, that's the pyramid kiln. I like them better and they're easier to make. I'll explain that in a minute. But we light that stack, and as it breaks down and makes a bed of coals, we throw a layer of wood in. Let that carbonize for a while. Throw another layer of wood in. Now, this is direct burn, but this thing is, what happens is there's a vortex. The gases that normally release as smoke keep spinning around in there, keep burning and breaking down. So the methane, the NOx, CO2 is all reduced. Well, everything is pretty much reduced down except some CO2 that does release, very small amount, and water vapor. So when you're doing these kind of what we'll call a controlled burn or a flame cap burn, if you get smoke, you made a mistake. And generally that's because the wood might have been too moist. You want less than 10% moisture to do this. So you get all that wood going, you keep layering it in there till it gets to the top, let that burn for a while. And then we keep a bunch of 5-gallon buckets of water around to quench it, to shut it off. And in that water is wood vinegar. There's not much use for anything else, because any nutrient or biology you put into that water is going to get fried as soon as it hits that fire. The wood vinegar will survive it. And the wood vinegar helps to condition the biochar, to bring the pH down and open up the pore structure to make it more hydrophilic as opposed to hydrophobic as it is in a raw state. So now we drain that water off, because that's good water. You want to keep that water. It's got beautiful compounds in it. Use it on your compost or your garden, wherever. And then we lay the biochar out or let it dry, and then we micronize it. So the 4 M's that I learned from Albert Bates, by the way, are moisten it after it's done, micronize it, make it in a granular size, 10 millimeters or smaller, mineralize it. Minerals are important. Give it minerals. And then microbialize it with biology and nutrients. Now you got something fully stocked and ready to roll. Because well, initially biochar is not ready to use. Because if you put this raw biochar in the ground, it's going to start sucking up nutrients and biology from everywhere and reduce the growth for that initial 6 months, a year, until it fully fills and then moves forward. So we want to use what we call inoculated biochar.
Yep, very familiar with that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that's always been an issue with 2 things. Number one, if it has not been prepped or added to vermicompost, compost extract, some kind of biology, you have issues right away.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's if it continues to build up over time, it also creates that disassociation with the plant. And maybe you can speak a little bit on that, because that's something that Americans, probably humans for the most part, if they have this, they love to be morons. Like, if a little works great, let's put more on, right? And there's a limit to that, where you end up causing a catastrophic doom loop if you continue to just pound things with, whether it's a nutrient, whether it's an input, a biostimulant. It doesn't matter. There's a threshold. I mean,
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit on the threshold of using biochar because it lasts so long?
Well, that is very interesting, because it really is different than so many other things, as far as, like, it's not concentrated. So the more biochar you use, the more water, nutrient, microbiology holding ability, the more carbon sequestration. It doesn't get to, well, nobody that I know of is going to get to the point of having that much biochar where there would be an adverse reaction. Nobody's putting 50% biochar in their soil. We're talking, that's serious tonnage to do that.
Yeah, right.
So pretty much everybody is pretty safe from any overuse of biochar, because it requires a lot of biochar in the soil. I would like to see a 20% value by volume if I could get that. Okay,
So
that's a lot.
you're talking about like land. So a lot of
Well, even in raised beds and potted plants, when we're mixing it up, I keep it at about 20%.
and that's always been my threshold. I tell people to stick to 15 because I don't want them hitting over 20.
Well, you know, I in some of my beds, I got more than 20 by a lot. They've been there for 15 years, and I always add more biochar through my composting. So let me bring up a couple of points that are really important to understand about biochar. Okay, this research that I was very privy to came from Cool Planet a while back.
Yep.
Okay, over a decade ago, when they were still around. They imploded, but that's another story. So what they were doing is they were isolating what the issues are with biochar. And, you know, most of us knew this in the industry anyway, but the first thing about raw biochar is it is hydrophobic generally. Okay, and that means it doesn't like water. And because inside those little pores, the surface tension's so high, it's literally pushing the water away. Easy to fix, break the surface tension. Composting does that. Liquid drenching to inoculate does that. Mixing with compost and worm casting, let it sit for a while, will do that. It will make it hydrophilic pretty quickly. So it's not a terrible issue, but it's something that has to be addressed. Secondly is the pH of biochar. Now, this is where a lot of misunderstanding is taking place. Biochars are generally 8 to 11 pH. However, they are not buffers. It's a very weak buffer. It's not going to, if you got a 9 pH biochar and you put it in your soil, you're not going to end up with a 9 pH soil. It's barely going to nudge it, if anything. The reason that we want the pH down is it becomes habitable to microbiology at that point. And that's what we really want, that biochar down there, to become this luxury condo. So the microbiology just flourishes and has happy life and multiples of life. So that's number 2. Number 3 is the ash content. Now, in a good commercial biochar like ours and many of the others, ash is not an issue. They're super efficient systems. If they get it, they wash it. No big deal with the ash. But if you're making it yourself, you could have that. I don't know how, Leighton, you feel about ash, but I've done classes where somebody raised their hand and said, oh, my grandpa used to take the ash out of the fireplace and put it in the garden. And I said, unless you're in the tropics, I wouldn't be doing that. Okay, that's just too much liming, too much high pH to be messing with. And if you do it badly, it takes a while to fix that. So by composting the biochar that has ash in it, it will neutralize that. Composting is my favorite way to do it. So we want to make it hydrophilic. We want to lower the pH. We want to control our ash content. And the fourth one is the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds. Now, they are volatile. They will volatilize out, but they're there in the beginning. Composting neutralizes that as well. So when you throw your biochar into your compost during the decomposition cycle, you get a big win on both sides, compost and biochar. Biochar gets turned into hydrophilic. The pH starts to come down. The ash is neutralized. The VOCs are neutralized. Okay. And then the compost is going to fill it up with nutrients and biology, especially if you do really good composting. Broad spectrum, lots of stuff in there, you know, a broad range of inputs into your compost. We put biochar, we put bokashi, which is a fermented grain. It's a probiotic. We put that in our compost to speed up and add biology. And we also put some rock dust in there too, as well as our food waste, yard waste, all the other things. We have about 12 ingredients that go into our composting. So with that said, biochar gets awesome in compost. The compost gets awesome because of the biochar. The research that's been done for many years shows that instead of a 3 to 5% possible nitrogen content left over at the end of the cycle, with biochar and wood vinegar, you can raise that from 50 to 75% nitrogen retention. It holds water well, so you don't wet your pile as much. It speeds up the process because it's advancing biology in there. It does an incredible job with the fungals as well as the bacterials. And you end up with more biology, higher nitrogen content, and a whole bunch of other great things. And if you think back 500 million years ago, when that first char laid on the ground, that char after a fire or any fire does not get down there doing its job for quite a while, decades maybe. In the meantime, organic matter is falling on top of that biochar and decomposing. Nature's been composting its biochar from the very beginning. We're just mimicking that.
Yep. Big fan of biomimicry.
Yeah. So biochar. Now, what's the percentage of biochar you put in your compost? Well, that ranges between 5 and 50%. And here's why and what you would want to choose. If you don't have a lot of biochar out in your gardens, your beds, or wherever right now, and you're going to be adding it through your compost, then I would put a lot of biochar in there. But I got a lot of biochar in my soil now. So I only put 15 to 20% biochar in my compost because I don't need to add that much, just a little bit more. And what does biochar, I mean, what does compost become? Your next generation of soil. So I'm just keep building my soil up with biochar. If all I did was with compost, I wouldn't have any biochar in there. In the Amazonian region of Brazil, over 1,500 years, they turned that awful soil into terra preta, the dark soil of the indigenous, and they did it layer at a time. And it goes down 2 meters into the ground. It's amazing. If you step outside that area and look at the same soil, it's barren. In the region that they affected, beautiful, black, rich, microbiology rich soil. So that was, it's interesting that we keep going back to nature, how nature did it. And composting and biochar are exactly that. Ah, perfect. There we go. There's the terra preta on the left, and there's the normal on the right. Quite a difference. There is a picture. I don't know if you can see it. It's the one to the far right. If you can get that one from the far right over there. Okay, you can see the crop growth. There's a visual of exactly what was happening in that area. This is a well documented and well known photograph in the biochar industry. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's actually they're talking that perhaps the whole Amazon rainforest was a food forest that was established by the indigenous.
You know, that's a very good way of putting it. It kind of was. To see, when they first started, when they first started using biochar or charcoal or carbon, you know, they didn't have those terms for it back then. They had about 150,000 population, and 1,500 years or so later, their population grew to 2.5 million. Now, just to understand the rainforest, you and I know this, Leighton, but rainforest is some of the worst soil in the world. There's so much rain, it washes all the nutrients and biology away. So it's pretty barren. The only thing you have there is about 6 to 8 inches of fertility from all the organic matter decomposing. So these people didn't have a water retention problem. I mean, a water retention problem. They had a nutrient and biology retention holding problem. And the way we understand this is that they were cooking communally in these big fire pits with the wood in there. And down below, there was no oxygen, but lots of heat. So the charcoal stayed charcoal. It didn't break down into ash. And as it built up, they excavated, chucked it over, continued to cook. And all of a sudden they went, wow, look what's happening over there. The soil's changing. Again, indigenous peoples, things right in front of their face. So they started incorporating it in. And over this long period of time, now we reach the year 1546. And Spanish explorer Ariana comes down the river, and he's sent there by Spain to discover gold. Of course, he didn't realize he discovered black gold, but he was amazed by 14 miles down the river of 2-story buildings. It was astounding. All these people, this advanced cultural, agricultural society beyond Spain, and they always thought they were the greatest of it. You know, they were kind of egotistical. So Ariana had I think it was a Franciscan monk with him, who jotted charts, maps, and journals of this whole thing. Ariana said, when we go back to Spain, we would be heroes. Well, nobody believed them. So it took 60 years for Spain to send someone else back. And when they went back with those charts, maps, and journals and found the place, nothing was there. Nobody was there. The entire population died in the first 50 years of smallpox, influenza, measles, and syphilis. Nature leveled all the buildings. It disappeared. 400 years later, the beginning of the 20th century, it gets rediscovered by the invention of the aeroplane flying over. People going, wow, why is that so incredible right there and not there? Scientists descended upon the place, first believing that nature did this. But as soon as they got digging in the ground, they realized humans did this for a purposeful reason, because they found pottery shards, bone fragments, shell fragments, all signs that someone had done this on purpose. The pottery fragments were interesting. They had discovered that they lived in the higher areas because the low areas got flooded out.
Mhm.
And so they defecated in clay pots. And they brought the pots down there and buried them with the charcoal and everything else that they would put in there. So they were composting, their waste and other waste and things like that.
You
So
knew
it was
her.
very, very interesting. So, yeah, here we go. Now, that Terra Preta de Indio area, people have been going down there with truckloads, taking it away. There's so much of it, bagging it up, selling it, doing this and that. Of course, it's discouraged to do that, but it still kind of happened anyway. But it is the richest soil in the world, considering how long a period they did it. Here's another interesting thought. Indigenous peoples all over the world did very similar things, just not to the level that they did it there. They had no communication with each other. Many, many cultures adopted charcoal in soil and other things because they're indigenous people and they saw that they just saw it worked. Charcoal is the oldest human remedy in existence. Before any other remedy came along, humans for many, many, many thousands of years were eating charcoal for a number of different things. It's great for digestion and so forth. Animals have been munching on charcoal from fires since animals roamed on Earth. They attract to it. It's a healthy thing. Elephants look for salt mounds and lick them. Animals recognize these values and they come and utilize them. So there's another whole avenue, which is animal husbandry and biochar. And this is fascinating. So, two little stories. One is that in Japan, 12 to 15 years ago, they did an experiment feeding biochar to the chickens. They just sprinkled the granular char down where they peck. They pecked it up like they would a rock for their gizzard to grind with. It made them healthier. Their poop didn't smell anymore. The ammonia was absorbed, so less potential for respiratory and foot diseases. But the eggs became better shell, better yolk, higher omega, minerals, vitamin, protein, everything excelled. And this Japanese research project, which was in rural Japan, they would sell the eggs once a week, and the women would line up outside the store and pay twice the price because the eggs are so wonderful. I mean, you think you got great homegrown chicken, organic eggs now, feed them some biochar, and it just raises it up. In Europe, 90% of biochar used in farms in Europe goes to a cow first. 2% into the cow's food. Now, cows are ruminants, 4 stomachs. They belch their methane. They don't fart very much of it. It always comes out this way mostly. And it happens in their first couple of stomachs. So by putting the biochar in there, it absorbs most of that methane and eliminates a lot of that methane release from the cattle. Now, what they found was that the meat cattle grew better, healthier, without any drugs, steroids, hormones, or antibiotics. Dairy cattle produced more and better milk. When the manure came out, when the vet bills went down, drug bills went down. Those industries didn't like that, but there was no stopping it. And when the manure comes out, they mix it with another 10 to 15% biochar, compost it, and use that in the field. That's how they do it. So very interesting. Do you know who Justus van Liebig was?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't put a finger on it.
Okay, Justus van Liebig is considered the godfather of, or the grandfather or godfather of modern organic farming. He's the guy that determined the NPK value of plants back in the 1840s. He wrote incredible books. He even did a whole book on animal husbandry and biochar. He was working with biochar in the 1840s. And in his will, when he died, he wanted biochar in his coffin. And he got it.
Good for him.
Yeah. So he was a very interesting guy. And he really brought out the beginnings of animal husbandry. I'm sure that indigenous peoples recognized it and fed some of their animals it. But as we know, he was the guy that really put it down on paper, NPK. But his NPK was not, fossil fuel bullshit. It was the real deal. And then, of course, the chemical companies and oil companies came in later on and dominated that market.
Yep. And conned us all. Well, that's really interesting. understanding of the benefits of it in animal husbandry, because when we were kids, my mother used to give us, and it must have been biochar. It must have been. It was like this little carbon, the fine carbon stuff that she would give us if we were sick.
Yeah.
And it helped to speed up the healing process.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so
Every hospital in the world, if you go in with a poisoning, an overdose, or some toxicity, the first thing they do is take your vital signs. And the second thing they do is pump a slurry of activated carbon, not like activating biochar. It's different. I'll explain in a minute. Activated carbon into your system. Now, it'll chelate into itself all that shit in your digestive system and take it out. It's great for diarrhea. It's great for indigestion, heartburn, acid reflux, a whole range of different things that it's very good for. If you are taking medications, you want to take it hours apart because it could reduce the effect of some of those medications. It's not going to reduce the nutrient value you're going to get out of your food. It's not, you don't have enough of it to do that. You're not doing it every day. But when you need it, it's there. And I have the capsules. Now, the difference between activated carbon is what you find in those capsules or in bottles of powder is they're generally made from hardwoods like coconut or hardwood. And they're a kiss and cousin to biochar, but they're slightly different in a few ways. First, way more expensive. Secondly, they have to go through, after the biochar is made, it's got to go through another process with catalysts such as steam and other things to create this activated carbon by altering the pore structure to such an extent it has incredible chelating values. However, it only chelates. It has no cation exchange or little to any. Whereas biochar can chelate and have cation exchange, meaning it can take in water and nutrients and let it out again for the plants as they want it. Whereas activated carbon will take that stuff in and lock it up.
Yep.
So we're not using activated carbon because it's way too expensive. Plus, it's not the right type of carbon that we want to put in our soil. We want that exchange of nutrients, water, biology going back and forth, whereas the activated carbon will not give us that.
No, so true about that. And yeah, that was the other interesting fact was I think it's a triple negative charge carbon. We were just reading about this the other day.
Oh man, I can't recall. That's years ago.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And because it's a negative charge, it does hold on to the calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very beneficial in soil in situ, in place.
Another interesting thing is that biochar will take things in like heavy metals, but it'll lock them up. They will not have access to the environment once it locks it up, and other things. And what happens is many of those things, not all, of course, lead and molybdenum and many of those, they're not going to break down to anything. But a lot of them over time, microbiology, and since it's going to be there for a while, will break certain things down and bring them back to a more organic state or a more usable state. But certain things just locks it up and makes them completely unavailable.
Yeah, I definitely think the potential in bioremediation is a wonderful place. I know of one of my colleagues who's doing lead acid mine waste. And they're using spent mushroom substrate, but there has been a lot of talk about perhaps starting to implement some, biochar or activated carbon or some other sources to help bind and lock up the.
It would definitely be one of the good tools in there. The mushrooms. I would also look to other plants. There's a lot of native plants and other plants that are very good at absorbing and taking this stuff in. So when I look at a remediation project, it's a multi-layers.
Yep.
You can't just go with one thing and think, oh, we're going to get there. Because your research at the end is going to say to you, okay, we got a little bit here. Boy, we could have thought about this earlier, maybe incorporated this and this and this. And so it is always multi-layered. There's no one ingredient or one answer to soil remediation. And again, there's so many different kinds of remediation and so many different toxins and so many different circumstances. They all have to kind of be approached individually.
Absolutely. That's the one thing that most people don't take into consideration. It's not just the one element; it's the multiple elements or compounds when they come together that reform and recreate even more toxic
Mhm.
compounds or split apart and become more widespread. So that is the big issue with bioremediation. And a lot of times the secondary, tertiary metabolites that come from it are just as toxic, but you reduce the half-life. So instead of being in the soil and deadly for 300 years, well, now it's only 150 years. I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but
Yeah.
it's not an end all be all by any
Well,
means.
I don't think we have end all be all to anything. It's always layers. It's always one step at a time. We fucked this world up enough that we got plenty of work to do. And if we keep hacking away the way we're doing, we may get there. It's unknown, but
Hopefully, before they remember the destruction's happening quicker than the healing at this point, or
yeah,
otherwise I wouldn't be doing this.
yeah. We as humans have this hubris that we believe that we're the rulers of nature, and fact is we're not needed here.
No, the
We
planet.
weren't here for a long time, and then we came, and then we fucked it up pretty damn quickly as
Oh
far
yeah,
as the clock of time.
geological time. It's a
Yeah.
joke. Yeah, we're gonna get scratched off like fleas, no doubt in my mind.
Well, in the meantime, we got a lot of exciting things that are happening. I'm just so excited. Um, I wanted to share another thought with you.
Sure.
So, a friend of mine, Nicholas Eccleberry, I've known for years, him and his brother Riggs. Back in the early part of the century, they had a company called Origin Oil, and they were extracting biofuel from algae. Other people were doing it too, but what they were doing was super efficient and super low energy. Everybody had these multiple machines with all this incredible shit, and they figured out how to do it through electrolysis.
Yep.
Okay, so they were doing that, and they were moving along. It was a penny stock. It wasn't, a big stock, but it was a penny stock, and they were having some success. But everybody in the biofuel movement, because I was in the biofuel business at that time, all the companies trying to create all these new biofuels and this and that, man, we were getting hit left and right by the oil companies, and they did everything in their power to screw with the biofuel movement, and they did. Plus, oil prices kept jumping up and down, so it made an instability for them, and they decided to switch gears and take this electrolysis process and clean up fracking water. And they did, and they succeeded, and the water could be cleaned up, and it was much less toxic to the environments, and they could reuse the water again. So that was going on. They sold that off. And then, about 2 or 3 years ago, he came to me. He says, I'm working to create nanobubble water.
Mhm.
And I said, cool, show me. So he brings over this little thing. It's 5, 6 or 7 inch diameter titanium plates, isolated, an anode and a cathode, positive and negative for those that don't know what that is. And you hook it up to 12 volts, you put that into the water, and it starts creating this cloudy looking water, which are the little teeny hydrogen bubbles. Then there's a little bit bigger bubble, the oxygen, not as much. So it changes the water, it changes the OPR, the oxygen percentage retention or reduction, from a positive to a negative in this oxygen thing. So it oxygenates the water. Sounds weird when you're going negative, but that's what it does. It sort of makes the water slick. So we were testing it at a farm in Somas for about 1.5 years now, and they were only using it for foliar because it was just a batch thing. They couldn't, set it up to their irrigation. They got amazing results. So we just delivered them a flow-through system that they just hook up to the water, and instead of having to make a batch at a time.
Mhm.
The results that they have gotten were incredible. Just so many things. There's a teeny bit of peroxide that is created in the process, which peroxide is really great for fungal and other types of bacterial other issues. So it makes the water amazing for drinking, for using for animal, for using for growing, both irrigation and foliar spray. And it's really freaking amazing.
So how do they clean the anode and the cathode?
You periodically have to clean it with either an acidic acid or some other acid, but not very much. There's a website. It's called electroaeration.com, I believe. Maybe it's electro-aeration, whatever. Just Google it, and
Yeah.
you can read up on what they're doing there.
Ken,
So
see,
I asked Nicholas about
yeah,
how would this work if we took this water to make cement. He goes, "Oh man, this is great for that." So I introduced that idea to the group that I'm working with on the cement, and they got excited. So they're going to be doing experimenting, maybe not in the first batch, but on the second batch of experimenting with making the samples with and without this nanobubble water. Now, the other thing about nanobubble water is there's a lot of companies doing it, and they got these monster high energy systems. This thing you can take out into the field, runs on 12 volts. You can take an old used solar panel, a battery, or hook it up to the alternator of your vehicle and run it anywhere on the planet simply. So it has its uses are down on the bottom, are much broader than these guys and these companies with these giant systems that you can't take anywhere. Now, you can store the water in an airtight container and it'll stay that way for like a long time. That means shipping it all over. We can make it right on the spot with an old solar panel, a used old solar panel that runs 12 volts, and run this thing. It's fantastic. They've really thought this thing out. So they're getting funded. They got some funding. They're getting more. They put me on they're putting me on a retainer sometime soon, as soon as they get their next funding. And they issued me some stock. So I'm quite excited about working with these guys. And I'm waiting for my flow through system to come so I can set it up in the backyard and bring people in to see it.
fantastic. Have you ever heard of Gaia water?
No, I haven't.
All right, that's another one. This gentleman ended up getting gifted, I believe, the patent for his nano bubbler maker. It's 3D printed, and it's just about an 8-inch long pipe, maybe 2 inches diameter. And basically, you run water in one end. Then there's a bunch of twists and turns with inside. You can't really see through this thing because it's again 3D printed. You can't. It's not a tube. And he connects it to a oxygen tank. You know, one of the little oxygen hoses for the elderly people when they have
Yep.
COPD. And it injects. Go down. Scroll back up, Ken. There's a tube right there. You see the port? No, you had it. See the port on the top of it right there?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where the oxygen goes in. And that's at the point where he's creating cavitation.
Uh-huh.
Cavitation is one of those energy forces that we don't completely understand. But it's basically like if you're driving in a motorboat up a river against the current, you can hit a certain point where the motor will absolutely start screaming and you're not going anywhere because you've created this force, anti-gravitational or restrictive force. And so that's what he did. And I've tested that on a couple of different projects. Now, the good news is I can get the parts per million up to 330 ppms of dissolved oxygen in the water column without killing the biology, which now this goes back to my early days at Rodale when, I was helping Elaine figure out why one of her brewers was always going anaerobic. It was simple. It was like, Elaine, you just need a bigger air pump, right? You got the water column's too high, the pump is too small. You're not getting enough dissolved oxygen into the tank. So I started thinking about it. I'm like, wow, why the fuck wouldn't we just use straight oxygen? It's a cheap gas to get. So I started experimenting with using pure oxygen in the bubbling process of the compost extract. Killed everything. Just absolutely oxidized the daylights out of everything. So realized, okay, don't be a moron. There is a threshold between too much. And I remember going back to Elaine being like, Elaine, this should have worked great. And she's like, no, Leighton, think about it. We could not breathe if it was pure oxygen for only a portion of time before it would kill us. So there is a level that's too much. I think that even even in those deep dives, I think they're using a mixture of gases. They're not using pure oxygen. Even
You
in
talking
all,
about for divers?
yeah, yeah,
Well, I was a diver for most of my life, and I got to tell you, every time I hear on the news, "Oh, the diver's oxygen tank," those are not oxygen tanks.
right,
They're just simply compressed air.
right.
You'd be dead in a minute if you breathe in oxygen, especially underwater.
You're right.
Your
Pure.
body would start to explode from the water the gas expanding in your bloodstream.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, no, it's compressed air. It always bugs me when they say oxygen tanks.
Yep. So anyway, needless to say, back to the story. In typically in whether it's a compost extract or aquaculture, there's a level of pure oxygen that if you exceed, you start killing shit, right? In fish, you burn their eyeballs out first, and then they get they explode. But that threshold was always down around 15 parts per million to not exceed. Ideally, 10% is where we tend to consider the sweet spot for both the fish aquaculture as well as in like your compost when you want to prove it's aerobic. As long as you have 10 parts per million, you're in a good sweet spot.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, those nanobubbles allow you to go to a higher oxygen content without killing everything. Now, the only bad part is as soon as you shake that, those bubbles start to implode and your DO crashes. So I'm wondering if when you do get that machine at some point, it'd be really interesting. If you don't have a DO meter, I have a very good one.
I
I'd
have
love
a,
to.
I believe I have a decent one. You know what I would have? I have the 5-plate prototype with the anode and cathode wire on it. I do have a little transformer. I don't know if it's working, but any 12-volt you want, I'll lend it to you to play with.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I'm
No,
not using it right now. I'm just, for me to make a batch, system like constantly for foliar or whatever, it's just too much. I already got plenty on my plate. As much as I love it, I'm waiting for the flow through to come through so I don't have to think about it anymore. I just hook it up to my hose.
yep.
I'm doing it. And we do add nutrient biology after we produce the nanobubble water. We don't know what'll happen during that process, whether it'll disturb it or not. Be nice to know. Maybe it's something you could play with if you're interested.
Well, I
To
could
take
tell.
a compost tea, put the
I,
unit in there, see what happens to the biology. Does it get altered?
yeah, I could definitely do a compost extract, run it through it for sure, and then scope it after. But
Okay.
my concern with minerals would be that they would instantly ionize onto or scale on the probably the anode or the cathode, depending on whether they're
Well, there are 5 titanium plates, 2 of which have rare metals embedded on them. So there's 2 different colors. There's the 2 outside middle plate, which is the straight titanium, and then in between the others are the other ones. I don't know what he fuses onto it, but they are a bit different.
so
We
so
haven't had any much problem with the buildup. I mean, that was a concern of his. He's pretty amazed how it doesn't build up, but it's easy to clean off.
got you. Yeah, but if you put raw or pure mineral in there, maybe that's a question you can ask at him. Hey, did you ever run like
Well, I could put you in touch with him. He's a great guy. He lives in
yeah,
town.
yeah. You got my number. Ping me
Yeah.
when we're off the show, and I'll just reach out to him to see.
Well,
If
I would recommend having him on the show one time. He's a pretty amazing guy. I mean, I
Sure.
admire him like I admire you because I mean, Leighton, I'm a soil consultant, but self-taught. You're a soil consultant and more. So I'm always looking up to you what you're doing. My basic goal in life is to get everybody who's gardening to at least start at a certain point to get to where you and I ultimately want them to be. And we got to do that very simply in our language, not too complex in our ingredients. Like in my workshops, I have a 3-point part. I'm glad we're going to talk about this now because something that's really on my mind. So I call it living soil, creating a living soil with biochar as a key component because it's the one that's going to manage everything. So in there is your new soil or base soil, your biochar, your compost, your worm castings, rock dust, and mycorrhizae, because we really want to support that fungal area. And you get all this built up, you're on your way to a living soil. You want to plant, cover with mulch. And then what I do is I come back after the planting is done, and I do a liquid drench of biology and nutrients around each plant to kick further forward all that's I put in there already. And then third step is foliar application, which we're all familiar with. All the action, the whole factory of plant is in the leaves. Down below is our supply chain. Up there is the factory, converts everything into sugars and carbs, goes back down, feeds everything. Pretty simple. But as we do this, these building that living soil, maintaining it, and doing foliar, we're kind of opening up that little two-way street more to, this is just, not literally, but we're opening it up to a two-way highway. And what I have noticed is when we start doing that, the Brix level starts to rise. And when we get that, by the way, Brix is BRIX, it's the sugar content of all plants. We measure it with a tool called a refractometer. This is a very good one I've had for many years. Oh, wrong page.
Yeah, I was going to say, what happened there, Ken?
There is a Brix testing kit on my website. So here's the deal. You need a couple of drops of the sap from the leaf or the fruit of the plant that you put on this refractometer. You close the lid, you look through, and in there's a blue screen with numbers on each side. When the light goes through the sample, it raises that bottom from blue, and so there's a white on the bottom. And wherever that blue and white meet, that's your Brix level, and there's a number next to it corresponding to it. When we raise our Brix level above 12, let's just say, which is a pretty good place to be, 12 or up, suddenly, God, I wish I had it with me now, but there's a chart. I have this chart that I give with the kit. It's laminated, so you can take it out in the field. And basically, it shows you that when you're getting above 12, insects and diseases will likely not form. And why? Because when the plant gets to that point where the Brix level's up, it's creating complex carbohydrates that are keeping those insects from chewing on that plant and diseases from forming. But for me, that's great. But what ultimately occurs is the nutrient density rises dramatically.
Yep.
And that's where we want to be, because even in the best organic markets, the best organic farms everywhere, nutrient density has been sliding down for 40 years. People say, oh, wait a minute, organic food is healthier. I say, organic food is safer, can be healthier, but it is initially just safer because they're not using chemicals on it. So anyway, two things I wanted to run by you about this Brix testing. So we really want to test the leaf. And let me tell you, a lot of leaves don't have very much sap in them. Not easy to get that out of there. So I came up with this little thing here. This is a very expensive one, titanium. Okay, it's a press. Just pull the cap off. There's one right there. There it is, right there.
Yeah, I was going to say, just get a plant press.
And you unscrew the little nozzle here, and you stuff your sample in there, put the cap back on, and crank it down until you can get 2 drops of sap. This changed everything because it was very difficult. A mortar and pestle, garlic press, nothing worked to get the sap out of leaves until I found this. And then my wife came up with the idea of taking this 5-bladed
Oh, nice.
Herb cutting scissor to cut the leaves up first before you put them in the press. And what happens is it loosens the cellular structure and allowing the juice to come out much more easier. So between this scissor and this little press, it solved all the big problems of doing Brix testing on many, many, many different kinds of plants and fruit.
Gotta love it.
Now, if you're a beer maker, you'll likely have a refractometer. Winemakers, people who collect honey, the best chefs in the world. One of my friends was a great chef, and he had a refractometer in his pocket. And when the produce came in from the market, he'd go out there before he let it in, pull a tomato, test it, pull a lemon, this and that. And if it didn't meet his Brix standards, he'd send it back. So it's a discerning tool for a chef, but it's a useful tool for many other industries. And we all should be Brix testing. It's like a blood test. It's a simple, basic way of understanding where you're at.
Yep.
And if you can get it above 12, you're going to be happy. Yeah, there it is. Thank you. That's the chart. Now, there is other charts that come with the kit. I don't know if they're all in there, but oh, yeah, that one there too. This is interesting. This is specifically to specific crops. I think the funny one is if you look at raisins, you go down to raisins, look at the sugar content of raisins.
Can you blow it up?
That's off the chart, 60, 70, 75, 80. Now, this refractometer I have only reads up to, I think, 32, but the one in the kit goes up to 80. And by the way, when you're getting a refractometer, you want to make sure that your refractometer is temperature compensating, so you don't have to mess with it. The cheapies don't do that. Only the decent ones temperature compensate. So this kit that we have is really wonderful. Now, I got one more little thing to show you. I found not too long ago. This is a vice grip with a special plate welded onto it. And you put your sample in there and you squeeze down to get it out. Now, I only got this not too long ago, so I haven't tried it yet, but it's ingenious. I had to have it. I think it was like 80 bucks delivered, but I just said, oh, I got to have that. So one day I'm going to try this out, but my little press works absolutely flawlessly.
How much was your little press versus the, those were 80? Was the press more?
Well, this press is not the one that comes in the kit. This is titanium. This thing alone was 80 bucks.
Gotcha.
And then I had to drill the holes in it.
Yep.
But the one that we provide in the kit is a wonderful one. It comes with the holes already drilled and a little screen in there. We throw a few extra screens in, so if you have to replace them. But it's a really terrific way of checking out where your whole thing is. Now, that one is, the picture is a drilled one. The one that we sell is much nicer. The holes are more precise and spread out. But when I first got them, I couldn't find them without those with the holes in them, so I had to drill them myself.
Oh, gotcha. Believe me, I understand that.
So we put out this bricks testing kit about 3 months ago, and I can't believe I just done a few postings and people are buying them because they're becoming aware of the wonderful use of this refractometer.
Yep, the value.
We also have something that's brand new. It's not new. It's new now, but we used to sell them years ago. It's a seed storage and germination kit, and it contains 3 items. One item is micronized biochar, and you take that micronized biochar, very small amount, comes with a little teeny spoon, and you put it into the container with your seeds, and you shake it up just enough to put a little coating. You don't have to drown them in it. And those seeds will store for a longer period of time healthy. When you do germinate them, that biochar will help in the germination. The other 2 products in there are the wood vinegar and the EM1. We put an ounce of each into the solution of a gallon of water, and we soak the seeds for 20 to 30 minutes or longer if they're harder. And then the liquid that's left over, because you can make up a gallon, you're not going to use all that. Seeds aren't going to absorb it all. Now you can use that for a foliar. You can use that for many different things. Put it on your compost, put it on a bed. So we're always, whatever's left over isn't being wasted. It's going to be find another home somewhere.
Hey, look who just popped into the chat.
Hey, Andy.
What's up, Andy? Look, we were talking about him last week, and here he is. Too cool. Too cool. Well, those are some really handy tools. Yeah, you know what I've done is I've relied on soil microscopy to really determine overall plant health. And when I achieve the levels that I expect or strive for, I have, almost no issues with pests or fungus or any of these things, because you're providing such a level of diversity that you're actually turning these, predators into more of a mutualistic, partner with the rest of the biology, because it's not like there's nothing here, so I'm going to kill everybody to get that little scrap in the corner. So fortunately, I haven't had to, go to that extreme. Now I do like doing leaf tissue and sap analysis, really to understand, okay, what's been here in the tissue and what's flowing in the sap. but there's a lot of intuition that you need to understand the test results, because this is not just something that, oh, look, I got plenty in the south. Well, where are you? What time of the year? Where's the plant in its process? They're like, 15 different variables that you have to take into consideration to really
Time of day as well.
hell yeah. And the other thing too is that a lot of people don't understand that the plant can pull minerals from older leaves to support younger leaves if they're struggling or waiting for the biological processes to bring them back up in the phloem. So there's all kinds of interactions that are happening. They're a great staple, but you have to understand how to look at it and how to use your knowledge to understand what exactly is going on at that point in time.
Yeah.
But no, very, very, very powerful tools if if you understand them. And yeah, I think for the everyday person, that having something like that, especially a lot of these, orchard managers around here, and there's a lot of people that are doing pretty extensive gardens. They should have those tools in their kit, because there's nothing more valuable than saying, oh, well, if my bricks are this, that means my overall nutrition is going to be that, right? There's a correlation between the two of them. It's not too hard to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, the other piece of that puzzle, if you want to boost nutrition, you have got to have nutrient cyclers. You've got to have the protozoa. You've got to have the nematodes, or otherwise you're not going to get the full benefit of all those diverse bacteria mining all those diverse minerals specifically for the plant that it asked for. So
that brings up a thought that I'd like to share.
Sure.
It's the difference between soil and hydroponics, for instance. I started growing cannabis in '69 in my apartment window in New York City. In fact, I still have one leaf from that first plant laminated on my wall, 1969. In the '70s, I was growing it in a secluded backyard in Maryland. And when I moved to California in '79, in 1981, I lived in my warehouse in North Hollywood. My buddy had a music rehearsal studio a few doors down. And he came to me one day and he says, the warehouse 2 doors away from you, I just paid the rent for a year. Here's a bunch of money, start growing.
Nice.
So I went in there and I just cleaned the whole place up, blocked the whole front door so I could only get in through the back where nobody would get to. It was a back alley.
Yeah.
And I grew half in hydroponic and half in soil. And I'd always been growing in soil, and there was no question the difference was dramatic. You cannot get nutrient density in hydroponics no matter what you do. And this came to me as proof when I took this 4-day soil seminar with Graham Sate. Do you know Graham Sate from Australia?
I don't know him. I know
quite impressive. It was done at the Tree People, and my $1,200 ticket was donated to me from Kiss the Ground because I did some work for them. They go, hey, we'll sponsor you. So I go there, and on the 3rd day, he brings up hydroponic. And I already kind of knew, but when he showed us the proof of the analyzation of zucchinis and other foods grown in soil and grown in hydroponics, he said, it's very attractive, hydroponics. People like it. Low water usage, all these features. You could do it indoors, you could do it outdoors, whatever. He goes, but the one thing that you cannot get, no matter what you do, is nutrient density. And here's the proof. And I went, I knew it. And at the time, I had tower gardens. You know, those. Yeah. I was a dealer. I was selling them. I had 3 or 4 of them in the backyard. Within a month of finishing that seminar, I sold all my hydroponic stuff and said, that's it. I'm sticking with the soil. You can't duplicate it. That's where the mother lode is. Nowhere else.
Well, there is a hybrid called aquaponics.
Yes. No, I agree. That's definitely closer.
It's a lot closer.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't put aquaponics in there in the same breath with the hydroponics.
No.
I mean, you could do some amazing things with hydroponics, and it looks great. But get under the hood and look what's there. It's not the same.
No, agreed, 100%. and I think that there's, I have one of my good friends. I have a few good friends. Charlie down in Santa Fe Community College, Charlie Schultz, who's always been probably one of the most respected people I know teaching um, aquaponics, and there's a lot of variables to it.
Yeah.
Um, and again, I have deep, deep respect for him, and he and I have had conversations both on camera and off camera about, like, hey, what about, putting in a little bit of, like a compost extract to supplement some of the terrestrial organisms, flagellates, amoebas, and stuff that you cannot grow 100% in aquaculture or aquaponics. And how do you think that that would affect, the system? Would that murky water cause other problems? Whether it's algae buildup or anything else, nutrient lock of any kind in the system. He's never done it, and I've pressed him to do it, but someday, hopefully, he will. Because I mean, that's been the key to my success, was introducing aquatic microbes to terrestrial microbes in the form of compost, and then adding worm castings, and then doing a strip. And it's basically you're creating dissolved organic matter, and boy, does it make a difference, within days of applying it. And so I got to think that it could go the other way, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it won't work.
Wood vinegar's got a lot of uses, and one of the uses could be, but people have done this, is very small amounts, 4 milliliters per gallon of water, very small amount. Incredible stimulation for biology, and everybody seems to be happy. All the critters seem to be happy with it. It's just enough to not put anything into any stratosphere. Just give them this little bit of kick, and other. It's also could be used to buffer water's pH if necessary. So yeah, there's definitely a use there for it. And one of the interesting things is, this is several years ago, Brian from Organic Solution, I had recommended that the hydrate that he puts into the worm bins, that we put some wood vinegar in there. And I suggested 4 milliliters per gallon. I mean, it's just a teeny bit. And so when we were about to pour it onto the bin, he said, well, let me just pour it on half the bin and see what happens. So we poured on half the bin and came back, I think it was a day or two later, and looked, and all the worms seemed to gravitate right over to it. The population on that half was way higher than the population on the other half. There was something about it. It's like, oh, you put a salad dressing on there for me. I like that.
Oh, that's too cool. Yeah. You must know Bob. We call him Char Bob or Biochar Bob. He was working with
Bob Serino?
Yeah, he was working with
I know. I just saw him in February.
Well, he went to Florida to do something.
Well, he went to somewhere in the Caribbean for a while when he got married. I've known Bob for many, many years. Bob's a good friend of mine. In fact, what's his wife's name?
Oh, are we talking about the same one? Bob, he has wood vinegar and some of his equipment at Peach Hill.
No, wrong guy.
Yep, wrong guy. Because Bob is American. But anyway,
I think I've heard of this guy though. I think Eric has told me about him.
Yeah, he's like super, super intelligent. Unfortunately, he's so intelligent that he doesn't speak well because his brain is going too fast. He's one of those. Yeah. But you can tell the depth of this man and the links to which he goes when he's researching something is hardcore. But needless to say, he and I were chopping it up at Peach Hill before he left for Florida. And we were talking about the value of wood vinegar in composting and how it actually accelerates the composting problem or process, which is great for companies like Agroman, who they got to churn and burn to get rid of that stuff because it's just that they can't keep up with the stuff coming in. But my question to him was, and I still don't have a straight answer, and I have not had the time or the wherewithal to run the test, is that in speeding up the process, is he off-gassing nitrogen? Is he volatilizing? Because that's always been the thing. When I worked with Agroman, they hired me to come in and help them create complete or biointensive compost, or fungally dominant was the buzzword they used. And so I started working with them and realized, oh my God, you guys are just, this is ridiculous. You don't even separate greens and browns. You can't. You're just, just grinding and piling these monster piles and then throwing water at them. The bottom is going completely anaerobic. The top is going hydrophilic. I go, you're just creating junk here, guys. I said, so I'm going to have to take a completely different approach. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to friggin' arrest the thermophilic process for two reasons. Number one, I want to hold the nitrogen. I want to hold the minerals. But more importantly, I've got to lower the temperature enough that's satisfactory for the advanced biology that I need to introduce it to it so that we can get some F to B ratio, right? So I used a bunch of different mineral powders and rock dust, and I actually was able to do it. I was actually able to shut down the thermophilic process on immature compost that would just keep heating up as fast as you turn it, it'll heat up. And the end result was I took a 0.501 compost or crap to a 4.521 organic fertilizer.
Wow.
And I arrested the thermophilic process. But to them, they had two main issues. Number one, you didn't reduce my pile, right? I need to reduce this. I need to make it smaller. And I tried to explain to them, no, you don't have to reduce it. You need to make it better so you attract more people to purchase it. Even if you're selling it at $1 a yard, that's $1 more than you're getting right now on 80% of the shit you make. And so that one didn't go over quite well. And the last thing was they were like, oh, well, you increased the bulk density. And I'm like, yeah, so what? Who cares? Well, we can only bring 3/4 of a truck now instead of a full truck. And I'm like, yeah, but if the farmer uses it and his fruit trees explode, don't you think he's going to not care that it was only 3/4 full because of the weight? And like, no, he's going to think we're screwing him. I'm like, you guys are all ass backwards about this.
That's been my experience with them for many years. Bill Camerino and Dave Green pulled me into their office once. I really wasn't sure while I was there. And they're talking to me, and and all of a sudden I just happened to say, I had a feeling they wanted to offer me a job. So I said to them, I said, well, guys, I love my life. I love being an entrepreneur, working for myself. I see myself, not working for anybody, maybe doing some collaborative things. And within 5 minutes, the meeting was over.
Mm-hmm.
I was out the door.
No, you're lucky. That would have not.
I cut it off before they asked me, and I had to say no.
Yep. No, that was a good thing, my friend. It was a good thing. I mean, even when you show them real positive results and steps in the right direction, they lose it. Like they don't understand.
I think that biochar would go a long way to what you're trying to do with this lower temperature. I think it would go a long way with it, because when I use biochar in my compost, even with manures and the hot stuff, I never get up to 140. I get up maybe up there, but I'm usually between 130 and 135, sometimes 125. That's my basic temperature range I run in, with the 15 to 20% biochar in there.
So
plus, I have an aerated system.
Oh, you use air under your windrows?
Under I have a compost barn, I call it. It's 8 by 10 feet.
Okay.
So the pile's 10 feet long, 6 feet wide, and anywhere from 2 to 5 feet, depends on how much material. But under the pile, before I put the steel mesh down on the floor, I dug out a trench, like a labyrinth, put 4-inch drain piping in there, connected it to a giant blower with a special timer that every hour it comes on for about 20 to 30 seconds. So it's always aerobic. I don't have to turn it, which is an advantage.
Oh, hell yeah.
I was having a conversation with Elaine on one of Matt Power's events. It was about a year or so ago. And she was talking about composting, and that when you do turn it, you're going to upset your fungal. And I happened to ask her, what do you think if we put biochar in there? It would help. She goes, well, you know what? If the fungal got into the biochar during that turning process, if it was in there, it would probably survive a lot better rate than if it didn't have it. And I said, oh, one of the few positive things she's ever said about biochar. She was on the bandwagon years ago for a little bit, off, on, off. She's not really on or off now. She's just neutral about it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very good friends with Elaine, or we're good acquaintances. Put it that
Yeah,
way.
sure.
I was blessed to train under her for 18 months, and
Cool.
yeah, way back when in the day. But needless to say, I wanted to make a comment about your aeration system. I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic because you're not constantly blowing. I hate those systems because most people that run them are just oxidizing the shit out of that material and off gassing, VOCing all of the compounds. And there's no way the biology can set up shop because
Right.
it's too much. It's
You don't
again.
need it, yeah. And the biochar in there is also capturing greenhouse gases.
Mhm.
So by putting biochar in there, what I've noticed is, yeah, there's no question there's a reduction in greenhouse gases. That's already been proven by other people. But what I do is every time I finish layering everything in there and I'm done, I put a little blanket about an 1/8 inch thick across the whole top. So anything that's not getting caught by the biochar in there, now I got this blanket of sequestration on there. So I mentioned it to, I think his name was David Crone. He was a professor at UC Riverside. He's in, I guess, a compost guy. And I happened to mention it to a few people, and he was standing there and he says, "Wow, that's great. Why didn't I think of that?"
No,
He goes, he goes, "It's got to work."
dude, you basically put a friggin' face mask on the outside of the pile to trap everything inside. I
Yep.
love it. Fucking
Yeah.
love it. That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah.
So back to your compost mating. How
Yeah.
much? What percent of high nitrogen do you use to start your pile?
Well, I'm going to be using some manures in there. I've got, of course, a lot of fresh, food waste. I got yard waste. I put wood chips. I put bokashi, biochar, rock dust, frass, occasionally shredded paper. Trying to think of everything. Oh, sometimes Ron Whitehurst will give me a big bag of dead bugs.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to
You
ask
know,
using bug frass.
yeah. Well, I was using the mealworm frass, which you can get really cheap down at Rainbow. You know that place?
I do not know Rainbow, but I know Brian turned me on to that.
Yeah, Rainbow is the place where Brian and I went for our frass. So
Okay.
it's a worm. It's supposedly the largest mealworm farm in the world. That's what they say. It's down in L.A. near Compton or something. And they generally will sell you a 60-pound bag for $5. But every time I've been there, I get into a conversation. The guy goes, "I'll give it to you for $3 a bag." But I don't know what the price is now. I haven't been down there a while. So I go down with my van, load it up, give Brian half, keep half. And I compost it. He feeds it to the worms. Oh, we also have a lot of coffee.
Okay.
Brian gets truckloads of coffee from some company. So I take, trash cans full of it and put coffee in there. We use a lot of eggs. Nothing goes to waste on this property. We rarely ever use the green bin because everything's being saved.
Yep.
We save every nut pit, every nutshell and fruit pit and avocado pit and everything. And I make biochar. Even the bones I make biochar from. Bone char is really good stuff.
Yep.
So I collect all this stuff, and then whenever I have a burn, I just throw it all in with it.
Yeah, I
If
was.
you'd like to do a burn at my place sometime, let me know. I got enough wood I want to get rid of. I need to do some more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
It's a lot of
definitely.
fun.
Dude, I've just been slammed. Like,
Yeah, me too.
and
So
it's good. It's good. I'm not complaining.
yeah, me neither. I'm not at all. But did I? I'm not sure if I touched the base on it during this interview today. Did I talk about the Burning Man thing?
All right, we're gonna have to get back to that. But
Okay.
oh shit. What was it? Damn it.
Oh wow, we're yeah.
Oh,
We're close.
oh, so yeah, I was fucking horrified when I got out here on these green bins. It's like, what are people thinking? All the biomass should be being ground up and put underneath bushes and trees and everything else. It should not be hauled off. You
Right.
know, I just was horrified that how much is going to Aggerman, how much is going to Peach Hill. It's crazy. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's just me ranting. But yes, let's go back to Burning Man because you touched on this biochar that you're making for them, but we also talked the fact that biochar is already cooked. So how are you getting it to?
Well, here's the thing. Just to briefly go over it again. About 7 years ago, my friend Ray Serino and I really wanted to affect the create a paradigm shift in the way Burning Man took place, rather than going from lots of smoke and all this ash to little or no smoke and biochar. And the key element is lighting from the top as opposed to the bottom. That's the key thing. But there's a few other things involved. So once it does start to collapse down, it tends to stay in the charcoal state. At that point, we rake it out, wet it down, shut it off, let it cool, grind it up, and we got biochar. Now, Burning Man has a lot of property up there. They own probably half of the place up there, the town of Gerlach. All of those areas, they own so much of it now. And they have animals on one of the ranches. They have their composting. They have the composting toilets. They have their trees, their beds, they're growing. They have so many different things. So there's plenty of room for all this biochar to be utilized. Now, I don't see that. Well, first of all, this year, we went down a week ago and we did this experiment and it was perfect. Everybody freaked out. It was 150 people there. I think there's some videos on my Facebook page that I put up a few days ago. And it worked. So the whole idea is not this year because it's already set, but next year we create this effigy, which is already being designed right now. In fact, the day we were there, Ray started already drawing up it. And then we want to have a little pavilion next to it. So we'll do the effigy, burn it all down to biochar, and then have a little pavilion where people can walk through, learn about biochar, videos, such show and tell, all kinds of stuff in there to educate them. And that's what that's the way I see it starting out. And then we want to create a video showing an effigy, two identical effigies, one burnt from the top, one from the bottom, and show them physically what happens and why it's a difference, and then give them all kinds of protocols to build theirs, but with a lighting from the top down. So one person said, well, what if we're going to have something that's 40 feet tall or 50 feet tall, how are we going to light it from the top? I said, there's lots of ways, well, we don't want to put any wires up there or anything. So some guy said, how about flaming arrows? And I said, wow, I'm an archer. That's a great idea. And then my friend Kelpie Wilson said, well, Michael, everybody's drone crazy there. You take a drone, you drop a little ping pong ball with some napalm in it on the top and light it there. So anyway, we want to affect this big change into how they're burning because first off, they're going to eventually be scrutinized for all the carbon they're putting in the air. We can reduce that dramatically. They're going to need to sequester carbon, and also I found out that this is very likely going to be able to get carbon credits for this. So I haven't told the people at Burning Man that yet because I got some more investigation to see how easy it is to do that. But I've been told that this type of burning can be considered conservation burns, which are getting carbon credits. That would be amazing. I mean, you get carbon credits on top of all this thing.
Right. So, but are you adding wood to it? So what is the composite? It's not.
Well, it's the wood that they're making their effigies and they're burning them, Now, we also want to get them to go away from plywood. Just recycled wood, repurposed wood. A lot of them buy new wood, but at least it's virgin wood. It's not pressure treated or anything. And they're burning it. So the waste that goes on at Burning Man is intense. You and I would freak out if we were there. But it's starting to change. And what we're trying to do is put this into a full-on big change, move forward, that's really thought out. It's got way more scope than not using plywood or finding reused wood or old wood instead of new wood. This is way beyond that because of the carbon sequestration and the less carbon going in the atmosphere.
So they're not using biochar. They're just burning it from the top down.
They're going to turn their effigies into biochar, not ash.
Got you.
Yeah, okay. That's the whole idea. Because then you got a valuable resource.
Now
so
I do.
It's not a major change. It's just some part of a mindset and also a little bit of physical building and a few other things. But the main thing that the difference is lighting from the top, not the bottom.
Got you. Yeah. So you talk. They have farms and stuff out there. I mean, that's the middle of the friggin' desert. Where are they farming?
It may seem like that, but yeah, they have the Fly Ranch, which is it's next to Black Rock City. And then there's the town of Gerlach, which they have offices all over the place. Like I said, they own half the town. It's not a big town, but they bought real estate everywhere up there. They own practically everything that is associated with them. It's pretty cool.
Interesting. Very interesting. Normally, I would have shut you down 20 minutes ago to start answering questions, but I've only seen 2 questions pop up. And all right, here's one. Is bamboo vinegar similar to wood vinegar? I believe was the question.
It is really the same thing. The reason they call it bamboo vinegar is this product came from China. And in Asia, all the wood vinegars are pretty much made from bamboo because they have such an abundance of it, grows so quickly, and they also turn it into biochar. And bamboo biochar is pretty good stuff. Now, the reason that I have 2 products on my website is I've been dealing with the Chinese for about a dozen years, and I am completely done with them. Done. The product was good, but dealing with them was a nightmare on many levels, including one of the last orders I got. Out of 3,000 liter bottles, half of them leaked in shipping.
Oh boy.
Post office called me up one day from somewhere back east screaming at me because the place smelled like a barbecue. What did you ship? So the new wood vinegar is American made, less expensive, and actually has more organic compounds than the bamboo vinegar did by 20%.
Wow.
Yeah.
So more diversity.
It's not that it's stronger, it's just got more
diversity.
Biostimulation in it. Yeah.
More diversity, different feedstocks.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So Ken, there was one other question way back when, but I don't see you got any in the box.
It was about because we answered it whether hemp we're using biochar and hempcrete.
Gotcha.
And you had answered that one.
Yeah, biochar is great for hempcrete. It really works well. There's both insulating factors, curing factors, minimal disease, funguses, or molds that could form on it. Whole lot of different things that it advances. It's interesting how biochar can do so many different things. You know, sometimes in the early days of teaching and talking about this, people said, "Oh, it sounds like snake oil to me. How can something do so many things?" Well, that's what nature is all about. Everything has something to do with something in another way. It has multiples of uses or factors about it that make it unique. So it's not crazy that biochar would do all these things and that wood vinegar would do all these things. By the way, wood vinegar is used in Oriental medicine for strengthening gut biome. But just like you said, Leighton, a little bit is all you need. Don't overdo it because you think it's good. Because it can actually upset the gut biome as much as it can fix it. So very small amounts. And I'm not recommending anybody do that unless you have an OMD, Doctor of Oriental Medicine, show you how to use it and prescribe it. And I've had people over the years call me all the time, generally an Asian, generally Korean, who, "Oh, my grandmother used this for years. We never knew we can get it in this US. We found it. Can I get a bottle?" "Yeah, sure." And so there are people out there who are using it for that. When we were up at Burning Man, the chef grabbed the bottle and he took the honey that they get from the fly ranch, along with Dijon mustard, equal parts, a little bit of salt, poured in a couple of tablespoons of the wood vinegar in there, and then a little olive oil as he was stirring it up, poured it on top of these sweet potatoes. Oh man, it was incredible. My wife makes a great Bloody Mary. And I put about 8 to 10 drops of the wood vinegar in there. It's now called a smoky Bloody Mary.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So here's a phenomenon I gotta ask you, and then we'll take this other question. In peach hill soils, there's a whole bunch of old totes full of different types of wood vinegar. There's one tote, when you open it, the bees come right away.
Whoa, I never saw that there. I was there a couple of times recently.
Dude, after we get off this damn thing, let's set up a time. I'm up there every morning now because I'm building ingredients piles for a big compost pile. So I start building salt, sugar, vinegar, butter, etc. And then once they're all done, then I'm going to blend them together. And
I got to see this stuff.
Yeah, I'll walk you through those wood vinegar.
Where did it come from?
Bob made them. He made them. He had a whole pyrolysis system, and he went down the rabbit hole so far on this.
Is that the one that was part of Genesis?
He used to hang out with the other guy from. You said it earlier. That 10 years ago they
Cool
crashed.
Planet.
Cool Planet. Yeah, so he was hanging out with another guy from Cool Planet.
Which guy? Wilson Hago?
I don't know.
Wilson was one of the scientists there. He's actually the guy I shared my warehouse in Camarillo with.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
he's got his lab set up. You got to come by the office. There's 2 labs there, plus all my inventory and all that. It's really a cool little atmosphere.
And
Andy wants to join you guys on that venture. Okay.
Yeah.
Andy.
Well, I've been trying to get Andy to come over, but he wants me to come over to his, and we've been too busy. I want to do that, and he wants to do mine, so we got to do it, Andy. Real soon, my friend.
All right, we're gonna have to get serious about it. But
all right. Well, listen, we really do need to wrap up because I have to get going. I actually have to go to the office right now.
Gotcha. All right. So there's 2 questions. Let's blow through them in less than 3 minutes and get you out of here.
Hey, the first one is any reason not to use dried reeds for biochar?
No, not at all. It's an interesting question, and here's a little bit of scope to understand this. Most biochar you'll find is made from woody biomass, not grasses like bamboo. Well, bamboo is kind of halfway in between, but grasses or palm fronds or reeds or things like that. The difference happens is this. When you have wood chips and you pyrolyze them, you've got a big chunk of biochar to break down into granular size. When you're using grasses or lighter things that are less cellulistic, so to speak, they tend to go to just powder. There's no in between. It's either the way they came out, which is going to break apart quickly, and most of those things just go down to a fine powder. And the ideal sizing for biochar is 1 to 10 millimeter for highest surface area and a whole other bunch of reasons. Now, when the chunk is too big, the interior is being wasted because nothing can get to it. So the inefficiency is down. So you want it smaller, 10 millimeter down to 1. When it goes much, much smaller into microscopic, real fine micron particles, it's not bad, but it loses some of its water, nutrient, and microbiology holding ability. Because remember, what is it? It's a structure.
Yes.
And when that structure gets real small, it loses some of that percentage of high capacity holding power. Doesn't mean the powder is bad. It's good. Just your ideal is 1 to 10 millimeter. You get your biggest surface area and your biggest bang for your buck in that sizing.
Cool. So then the other question is, what would you suggest as an application rate of wood vinegar for compost? I have approximately a 5-yard pile. How much for each application and how often?
Oh, I would probably go with 2 to 5 gallons, and I would be using 1 to 2 ounces per gallon. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to throw some EM1 in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a liquid probiotic.
I just had one statement to make is Mr. Charlie Schultz was using biochar. He just started using it as his grow medium instead of the hydroton or the clay pellets. So we'll have to have him back on, Leighton, to see how that is working in his aquaponic system.
Yep, absolutely, for sure.
I'd be very interested to see that too, because I think it can be done, but you have to have a very, very good biochar with no issues to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience was it was a 50-50 biochar to whatever other medium you're going to use was the most ideal way to go. But I'm not saying that's absolute. I would like to hear his research because I haven't played with this for a while. But I do know over the years, dealing with hydroponic people, even they came to the terms that 50% was a really good mix, 50-50 biochar with whatever the other medium is that they were using.
All right. Well, we'll definitely get him on in another couple of months and catch up with him because he's working on some crazy stuff too.
Awesome.
And Michael, thank you so much for giving us 2 hours today. Really appreciate the time.
Hey, it was my pleasure, man.
Yeah,
so let's get together soon because I will get you that electro aeration unit to play with.
Yeah, and let's
I
get
would
you.
love to see your feedback. And I know that when you meet Nicholas, who invented it, oh, you two guys are going to have a jam session. This guy is so smart, and he's like you. He's got so much to share, and he's been doing this. I mean, he's got patents going back into the 90s on some of these systems that he's built. So he's
well, you'll
really gonna
have
be
to send him the information so I can reach out to him and get him on with Leighton.
I will do that. I'll
Perfect.
send you his contact.
Perfect.
Okay, Michael.
Awesome.
Well, you go to work.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you, everybody.
And Ken,
Bye-bye.
thank you
Well,
for all the behind-the-scenes work as you always do, my friend.
You bet. All right, guys.
Bye,
Next
Andy.
week we got Tom Landry on, so get an update on the commercial grow that's using the horizontal soil system. You're gonna want to check that out next week. And Andy and I, of course, on Wednesday nights. Don't miss it because you never know where we're gonna go.
And
All
Andy,
right.
you're supposed to sign up with Ken, so you're supposed to come on here. So get there you go. Yes, call him. Get it done.
All right, guys, I'm gonna end the broadcast.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.